Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd and this is my review of episode 6 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds called Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. And in my opinion it was a decent episode and I am glad the show did go back to the old style of storytelling in the Star Trek franchise, meaning each episode has its own story and it's about actually meeting new civilizations, different kinds of societies, and having some kind of moral dilemma in the science fiction idea. And very often in those kinds of stories they would meet some civilization which appears to be utopian, but then there's some kind of twist to reveal that it's actually all an illusion, or it's actually based on something very creepy. And so it was always fun to play with those ideas, and so I am very happy that this show is finally back to doing those kinds of stories. And visually I think the show is great. I talked about it before. My only real problem is that it doesn't fit continuity with TOS, unless maybe in the very last episode of this show the Enterprise will be undergoing a major refit in another shipyard and will not see the final result, and that way it can tie into TOS more easily. Or maybe just admit this whole show is a reboot taking place in a new timeline, and then also it will be okay. But I do like the show by itself. Visually I think it looks great. All the sets are beautiful, it's a place we want to be in, everything is colorful, the crew are mostly friendly toward each other, and so it finally feels like what Star Trek should be. And the story itself, finally, it's about meeting new civilizations, encountering a new society with something strange in it. The twist is that there's some kind of dark secret, that everything is based on something creepy and evil. So I saw that surprise coming from a mile away, and it was so strange how Pike couldn't see it coming because there were so many clues to it, and yet Pike was completely clueless about it until the very end, which was kind of funny that this character seems kind of slow. And there was also the thing with the captain hooking up with the woman from the planet, just like Kirk always did, and Riker later, and so on. So that was also kind of going back to Star Trek's roots, and I'm fine with that. I thought that was okay. And I think the main story in this episode was heavily inspired by the short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, which Alex Kurtzman himself said inspired him for the idea in season 3 of Star Trek Discovery with that Kelpian kid who caused the burn accidentally because he lost his mother and got stuck on a planet. And I remember making a whole long video about it back then, saying how they totally missed the opportunity to have an actual moral dilemma, like in the actual story that inspired them, of a necessary evil, the good of the many versus the one, and all of that. And as I was watching this episode, I suddenly realized all the similarities to that story again, only this time they did it better, because this time they actually did have a moral dilemma, so it was done much better. And in that story it's basically the same thing as in the episode. It's an utopian society in which everyone lives a happy life with no disease, no war, no problems of any kind, but it's all based on the suffering of one child who has to live in absolute misery for all of that to take place. And some people from that city choose to leave it because they cannot accept the torturing of a child for their happiness, and so they leave the city. And we have the same kind of story here about a planet which they never fully explained it, but I think there are enough clues for us to figure it out by ourselves, and so in a way I like it that they didn't go into detail, but it's obvious that the planet is kind of unstable. It has lava rivers on the surface and stuff like that, and that's why they all live in those floating cities in the sky. And they also have technology which can heal any disease and all of that, and so they live in a paradise kind of society. And also this society has no disease of any kind because they have advanced technology, and in the end of the episode it's revealed all their technology is based on some kind of a machine which has to use the nervous system of a child in order to function. And so once in a while they have to hook up a child into that machine or computer in order for all of it to continue to work, and that child will suffer presumably for a few years in that machine until he has to be replaced with a new child. And so it's almost like human sacrifice going on to keep this paradise going. And so it's the same kind of idea as in that short story. And there's apparently a nearby planet with a colony of those same people who object to this way of life, and they try to save that child from being sacrificed in the beginning. And I also like the fact that the Enterprise intervenes against the wrong side, basically, because at first they fought off that ship which tried to abduct that child, and from their point of view they thought they're helping the good guys, but watching it in retrospect you realize they helped the wrong side. And that shows why the Prime Directive is a good idea, because how can you intervene in other people's conflicts when you don't know the full picture, you don't know the full details, and you might pick the wrong side. And also in the end of the episode, they kind of left that planet to their own way of life and didn't try to force anything, and maybe it's a good thing, because if they did that, it would destroy the whole society. If all the cities fell from the sky as a result, or all of them die from illnesses or whatever, maybe they will be guilty of killing millions or billions of people by saving that one boy, or they could have done the other way around and forcing Pike into a situation in which he will have to put that boy into the machine. If he starts to see the destruction of all the cities around him and millions of people dying, maybe he will be forced to put the kid into the chamber and all of that. And so they just chose not to choose and just leave the planet to do whatever they want, which is the correct thing by the Prime Directive anyway. So I love the fact that it is a moral dilemma. It's something we can debate about and talk about. And also I love how this story ties to the personal stories of some of the characters, namely Pike, who knows that in a few years he will need some serious healthcare, and so he's tempted to join this planet, which will be able to cure any condition he will have. But by the end of the episode, he knows that it's all based on sacrificing a child, and so morally he cannot accept it. And there's the story of the doctor with the terminally ill daughter, who he now knows this planet can cure her. But they specifically say that the planet will only help those who become part of its society. So they cannot just ask to be given the cure, they need to become part of the society to be allowed the cure. And so they have these moral, ethical dilemmas of having to accept the society's way of life, of basically human sacrifice for the greater good. And I think there was a slight missed opportunity. I think those moral dilemmas, those personal stories, should have been more of the focus, meaning by the end of the episode he should have been given a clear choice of curing his daughter, but at the cost of joining that society and living there, and him refusing to do it because he couldn't tolerate the thought of the cure coming from something so evil and terrible as the child sacrifice and all of that. And so I think they could have done a little bit more with that in a way that could have been more dramatic. And I also like how much the episode developed the character of the kid who was sacrificed in the end, so that we, the audience, will like him so much, and that makes the ending so much more horrifying than if we just saw some random kid we don't know going into the machine. But because we got to know him a little bit more, that makes it much more heartbreaking. And there are some cute scenes with him talking science with Spock and playing with a little sick girl in sickbay, and he's shown to be so brilliant, so clever and so nice and all of that, so that makes the ending much more dramatic and sad. And there's the little subplot of Pike kind of falling in love with that woman on the planet, and by the end she's revealed to be kind of evil, a little bit too much for his taste, and so he has to leave. And the whole episode they were talking as if the child was about to become the leader of the planet, but the clues started piling up more and more that he's actually meant to be some kind of a sacrifice and not really becoming the leader. So technically that woman was the leader, and that reminds me of the pattern from Star Trek Discovery, in which on every single planet they meet it's always a woman in charge. And there's also a scene of her talking with some of her guards, and we see all of them are from different ethnicities and genders. So we see an Asian guard, we see a female guard, we see a black guard, and a white man guard, and guess which one turned out to be the evil traitor? And I kind of laughed at that because it was so predictable, because of the pattern, because that's what always happens in the new shows. And so of course it's the white man who was the evil one, even though technically because of the twist in the end we figure out that those rebels were actually trying to save the kid, and so technically they're not the evil ones. So maybe it's not as biased and one-sided as in Star Trek Discovery, but it still kind of made me laugh when watching the episode. And also there was the scene in which he kidnaps this woman and about to kill her, and for some reason Pike says his phaser doesn't have a stun setting, that it's not on stun, and he cannot change it back to stun for some reason. I guess so that we wouldn't ask the question why doesn't he simply stun them both when he takes her captive. So his phaser is not on stun, and then the woman rescues herself. Pike is right there standing there, but it's the woman who is so powerful that she defeats that guy who is twice her size all by herself and kills him. So once again, a death of a nasty male in the show. And so that kind of made me laugh because it fits the pattern of STD, and I'm making a whole compilation of all of that kind of stuff, and it will be hilarious. I think it's coming in the near future. I'm waiting a little bit just to have a few more examples from this show, which I'm sure will come. And also it's funny how in that scene when the child was hooked up into the machine, the woman who explained it all to Pike said that the next time it will be a girl. And that also made me laugh because it's as if they have to insist, they have to make sure the audience knows that it's not only boys who are able to power that machine, that girls can do it too. And so the next time a human sacrifice is needed for that machine, it will be a girl next time. So it's a boy one time and then a girl next time. So it's a very diverse human sacrifice. It was very important to mention it in the script to make sure the audience knows that the machine doesn't discriminate genders, that it's not only boys. The next time it will be a girl who will power the machine, because girls' nervous systems are just as good as the boys to power this amazing civilization. They just didn't want to show a girl being tormented in the machine, and that's why it's a boy this time. And so there are some remnants of STD stupidity in this show as well, but it's not even close to the bad writing of STD, and also there were no gruesome torture scenes actually showing us the torture, like those little mechanical tentacles that hooked into the boy's brain didn't go in through his eyes as would have happened in Star Trek Discovery or Picard, in which they were always trying to be as gruesome as possible. So this time it was not as nasty visually, maybe because it's a child, so they didn't want to make it too graphic. And they do specifically mention that the child will suffer for years in that machine until he dies, and so that is still horrific without actually showing us that. And also there was a mention that in the Federation some children are still living in poverty and all of that, and that also annoyed me, because why didn't Pike respond by saying that no, in the Federation every single child is taken care of, there is no more poverty in the Federation and all of that? They didn't say that. But you know, because it's pre-TOS, it's not in the time of TNG yet, so I'm willing to accept that the Federation is not yet as good as it was in the time of TNG. And even in the time of TNG and Deep Space Nine and later, they did show us that some planets do still have poverty and all of that, so the Federation is not that perfect that it can take care of literally everyone in the galaxy. So I guess I'm okay with that. So even though I do have some complaints about this episode, I thought overall it was solid, it was a good episode. And I like the fact that the show is going back to Star Trek roots and showing us the kind of science fiction stories and morality tales and all of that in a decent way, and visually the show is great. And so that's my thoughts about it for now. Let me know what you think and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.